All right, so today we're going to dive into division by division and hopefully get this wrapped up in the 30-minute time frame. There's a lot of news and a lot of notes and injuries this week, and so we're going to try to do our best to get through all that. But remember, this show is sponsored by IDP Plus. Get more in-depth topics covering IDP, Dynasty Football, and NFL betting. Subscribe today to the YouTube channels IDP Plus Fantasy, IDP Plus Bets, and IDP Plus Shorts, as well as go to idpplus.com and become a subscriber there. All right, let's get into it. All right, so this week we're going to be covering news and injuries division by division, and we've got a lot here for you. So to start this off, we're going to kick off with the NFC East and looking at Washington Commanders and those defensive tackles. Ricky, what's going on with the Commanders' defensive tackles?
What's really interesting is that Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, who historically the past couple of years have played over 80% of the snaps, are down much lower. This last game, Jonathan Allen was at 56%, Daron Payne was at 61%. Obviously, the less time on the field, the less stats they're going to accumulate from an IDP perspective. No different than a running back not being on the field to get carries or whatever. So for Darian Mathis and Johnny Newton, the early second round draft pick, both played about 36, 37% of the snaps. So Dan Quinn, his defensive background is creating more of a rotation. That has hurt Allen and Payne. If you're holding out for hope, unless you see there's some other injuries, you might want to part ways, particularly in shallower leagues with Allen and Payne, and look somewhere else.
Gotcha. All right. So moving to Dallas and the Cowboys, you've got Micah Parsons here. What's the update with him?
Micah Parsons, so he was deemed with a high ankle sprain. Now at the same time, they're trying to convince people that he'll play within 1 or 2 weeks. High ankle sprain and productivity do not go hand in hand. That is just not a good combination. So even if he makes it on the field, look at what happened to Max Crosby a couple of weeks ago. Didn't play his usual 100% of snaps, was not nearly as productive, and then they finally decided to sit him out. If you compare that to Micah Parsons, that's what they should do, is sit him out at least a couple of games. We'll see. But if he's playing, I don't know if I'm putting him even in my lineup, though, because of that high ankle sprain. I just don't think you get the productivity. On top of that, DeMarcus Lawrence, the bookend defensive end, also went on IR, unlike Parsons. Parsons has not gone on IR. But the depth of the Cowboys just takes getting more and more hits. Previously, Sam Williams went on IR. So really going to struggle on the edge rushing side of things. Marshawn Nealon, second round rookie, is next in line for snaps. Chauncey Golston, Carl Lawson, who probably passed a little bit of his prime, was on the practice squad, got called up for this last game, and then on Tuesday, they signed KJ Henry off of the Bengals practice squad. Of course, Henry was a fifth-round pick of the Commanders. They let him go. He was on the Bengals practice squad. They'd elevate him. Now the Cowboys put him on their roster, but he's not someone worth rostering. So got quite the mess on the Cowboys defensive ends. Like I said, I'm not playing Parsons as well, so I'd just stay away from all of that. On the linebacker front from the Cowboys, though, I would add that for the second week in a row, things are starting to shake out on playing time. Eric Kendricks, number one. DeMarvion Overshown, number two. He played about 87% of the snaps this past week. Then the rookie, Maris Lufau, and then unfortunately, Damone Clark is now in the fourth spot. I say unfortunately because they're disrespecting my LSU Tiger. But so I always got to get an LSU reference in, as you know. But anyway, so that's what it looks like. And Overshown was flying all over the field. I have great hopes for him as we move forward. But Lufau would be I call it the handcuff for Kendricks in particular, if Kendricks were to get hurt, based on what we're seeing right now.
Gotcha. All right, let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles now. You've got some notes on Reed Blankenship.
Yeah, there's not a lot to talk about here other than Blankenship left the game against this past week here, and he was designated with a quote illness. And boy, I was really disappointed because I could have used some of the points he would have his backup Tristan McCullum ended up picking up, who went in his place. This was just a 1 week thing. There's been nothing else on the internet saying that there was some sort of serious injury. Eagles going by. Following week, put Blankenship in your lineup as a starting safety.
All right. Switching gears and heading north in the NFC. What's going on with Green Bay Packers and the defensive tackles there?
So what's interesting is Devontae Wyatt, who had 2 sacks the week before and been really productive. There, and in general, just a general comment first, a lot of IDP injuries, a lot didn't come out on Sunday, but then we found out a lot more on Monday and into Tuesday morning. And one of those was Devontae Wyatt, because when I looked at the snap count, like, oh wow, he only played 37% of the snaps this week. Something's going on here. And lo and behold, it turns out he had a high ankle sprain similar to what Christian Watson had. So expect him to potentially sit out a week or two. It's a little bit difference with defensive tackles. So he might be able to come back a little bit sooner. But with him out, TJ Slayton is more of a run stuffer. But Carl Brooks, who had a surprisingly good rookie year, if you're desperate with buys and so forth, Carl Brooks might be an interesting gamble.
Gotcha. All right. Uh, let's talk about the Packers linebackers now.
So Quay Walker played 100% of the snaps, but a lot of the Packers fans were really unhappy with some of his performance. There was a lot of noise on with all the experts that we have on X/Twitter talking about how he missed a lot of plays, overran holes, etc. But he still played 100% of the snaps. Just keep an eye on things. Isaiah McDuffie, though, the number 2 linebacker, last 3 weeks, or excuse me, 4 weeks, he went from 97% of the snaps, 88%, 79, now 76% of the snaps. And Adrian Cooper again played about 31% of the snaps this week after 33%. Cooper was injured earlier this year. You could see they're slowly grooming Cooper to go in the thought process. And what I've been telling our listening audience here is to watch for Cooper taking McDuffie's place. But if the Packers and some of the noise on the internet is true, and the defensive coach is seeing that, does it become McDuffie and Cooper, and does Walker get hurt? Just something to keep an eye on. Right now, I still think it'll be Cooper eventually taking over from McDuffie.
Gotcha. What about Minnesota and the Vikings? You've got some linebackers here to talk about.
Ivan Pace once again missed this past week. Kamu Grugier-Hill played for him, and as typical, he made a big play, a splash play that usually has big points and all, but not a solid floor of tackles and all. And KGH only played 34% of the snaps this week after playing 31% of the snaps last week. Don't expect that to change. What worries me is when Pace comes back, is he going to be in the 30% as opposed to in the 60% range? Not great for him from a productivity perspective, even the 60. But if he's in the 30 like KGH is, ooh, that could be not good from an IDP perspective. So before you put Pace back in your lineup, even if he's active this coming week, do not put him in right away would be my recommendation. Also, Dallas Turner surprisingly only played 14% of the snaps. Now, granted, he's coming off of an injury, but Patrick Jones, who I've been tough on previous episodes, maybe the light bulb is going on for him. He's doing extremely well. And between Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, and now Patrick Jones doing so well, Dallas Turner, as talented as he is, he was a little bit light in the britches, for lack of a better term, coming in. It's given him a chance for learning curve, but he's someone in a redraft league. If I've been hoping for better luck later this year, I'm comfortable dropping him.
All right. Let's move south in the NFC and into Florida and talk about Tampa Bay, the Buccaneers. What's going on with Kalijah Kancey, Logan Hall?
Yeah, so across all 3 levels, the Bucks have some injury challenges and all. Kalijah Kancey, who I had big hopes for this year, finished strong last year. Thought for defensive tackle leagues in particular, mandated leagues, that he would be someone to target as a upside player. But he's been injured a lot, and he's sat out again this past week. Logan Hall took up a lot of his snaps. Former first round pick Logan Hall just hasn't done much with it. Just doesn't have that explosiveness that they need. So avoid this situation. If Kancey's been dropped, someone, if it looks like he's going to be active, you got room on the end of your bench, maybe in a defensive tackle required league, once again, maybe pick him up and stash him.
Gotcha. How about the Bucks? Servasia Dennis, what's going on with him?
Injured reserve. So very, very early in the game, I think it was on his 5th snap that he played. He tore up his shoulder, and it was a serious injury. It was announced serious, and on Tuesday he got put on injured reserve. They called up Anthony Greer, who I've never heard of, by the way, and I know a lot of players, but that one I never heard of. So he got signed from the practice squad. So what happened when Servacio Dennis went out? KJ Britt and Dennis had been doing 50%, 50%. Britt took all those snaps, makes Britt way more attractive. If he is out on your waiver wire, go grab him and start him. He'll get 80, 90% of the snaps.
Gotcha. How about the Bucs safeties?
So Winfield once again sat out, and they play an early Thursday game, and he was listed as out in the, we didn't practice, but we have to turn in an injury report kind of thing. So with that, it's expected that Christian Izien again will be the starter at safety. Now, he in many leagues is listed as a cornerback. So depending on your scoring system, he could be quite the cheat code. So I think this will probably be the last week, and then Winfield will be back, particularly with the extended bye from the Thursday night game. So you could maybe use Christian Izien as a cheat code this 1 week, but then drop him and pick up somebody else because Winfield will be back.
All right, moving to Atlanta. You've got some notes here on the Falcons linebackers. What's going on there?
So Troy Anderson, once again, something I didn't see announced during the game or anything along those lines. Didn't see anything on Twitter. Only played 76% of the snaps after being in the 90% range. I'm like, hey, something's not right here. Sure enough, it turns out he had a knee injury. He's being labeled as, quote, day-to-day. But with the game once again on Thursday night, he is certainly not going to play right now. He was listed as did not practice. So what does that mean? JD Bertrand was the rookie out of Notre Dame, who filled in those spots. At the same time, they signed Rashaan Evans to the practice squad, which leads me to believe this feels like more than a day-to-day if they quickly sign Rashaan Evans on Monday to the practice squad. So Bertrand could be a sneaky pick, particularly with bye weeks and all. He could be a sneaky pickup, I should say, and just keep an eye on Rashaan Evans. But at this point in time, no signs of him putting on IR, so less than 4 weeks. But before Thursday night's game, he might go on IR. Keep an eye on that.
Gotcha. Let's move to Carolina with the Panthers and their linebackers. What's going on there?
This was another interesting one that didn't see any kind of reporting on Sunday. And I'm looking at the snap count later on, and it's like, oh, wow, Shaq Thompson down from 100% to 69%. Josie Jewell stayed in the high 60s as well. You would have thought he would have bumped up. Well, it turned out Shaq Thompson tore his Achilles on IR out for the year. Josie Jewell hurt his hamstring. He's basically going to be out for at least this week, possibly even another week or two beyond that. They don't think it's a, quote, long-term injury. So, boy, Trevin Wallace, the rookie, who solid in run support, but not exactly great in pass defense. He ended up playing about 37% of the snaps this past week. And Claudin Cherilus played the other 13%. Now, that's a name you probably haven't heard of. So, not sure I'm rushing to enter into my lineups either of those two gentlemen. Maybe someone you're trying to put on your bench, at least I would do that with Wallace. I'm not sure about Cherilus there, but boy, that Panthers linebacker position, something to avoid. Top of that, Shy Tuttle missed this past week. Ashawn Robertson played over 80% of the snaps. That's how little depth they have. LeBrian Ray, undrafted free agent out of Alabama, picked up 75% of the snaps. So those are the two people that played in Shy Tuttle's place. And remember, they lost Derek Brown earlier. They're hurting on that interior. Robinson is, he's a crafty veteran. If you have, good scoring system for tackles, worth picking up. But that the Panthers feel bad for him. For those that, the Andy Dalton and how he's turned things around for the offense, I think that bodes well for the offense as a side note. The other thing on the Panthers, Jordan Fuller went on IR. Nick Scott did pick up 100% of the snaps. Xavier Woods had a very productive week in terms of scoring and putting up some IDP stats. So I did a little research, thanks to PFF. And one of the things they said is Xavier Woods actually played where he used to play more deep, and Fuller was getting more of the snaps closer to the box. There was a little bit more of a blend between Fuller and Scott. I don't know if that's a 1 week thing or is that because of Scott or what. So with Woods is going to play a little bit more closer to the line, get a little bit more opportunities from that regard. He could be someone to pick up in IDP, something to keep an eye on.
There we go. All right, let's move over to your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. How are they doing?
Well, the Saints blew 2 games. They should be 4-0. Don't get me started about how do you give up 2 victories in the last minute of a game. But I digress. Demario Davis missed his first game in like 160 games or some obnoxious number, which is incredible for a 35-year-old linebacker. But that's part of the reason you stay away from 35-year-old linebackers in redraft, folks. Pete Werner ended up playing 100% of the snaps. Willie Gay, as we talked about last week, moved into Werner's spot. Problem is, Willie Gay got hurt. I myself and others expected that if something were to happen to Gay, the third linebacker would be Anthony Orji, he was an undrafted linebacker out of Vanderbilt, very productive in the preseason. But DeMarco Jackson, the former 5th or 6th round pick that the Saints had, is actually the one who stepped in Willie Gay's presence. So if you're looking for someone to stash, it's DeMarco Jackson till we get a little bit more of an update on Davis as well as Willie Gay.
Gotcha. How are those Saints defensive backs?
Well, on the safety side of things, Will Harris played 100% of the snaps, so he is truly the starting strong safety over Howden. Tyrann Mathieu, once again, another older Saint, he's been very productive, doing very well, but had a groin injury, and when that happened, Jordan Howden came in and played the snaps. So watch out for Mathieu. Howden could be in there, but I would not be rushing to pick up Howden.
Gotcha. All right, let's move on to our last NFC division, heading out west, and we're going to talk Arizona Cardinals. And what you've got some information on Mac Wilson for us?
Yes, so we've talked in previous episodes how the Cardinals have tended to have one linebacker playing almost 100% of the snaps, Kaiser White, and then the second linebacker only playing 60% or so. For the second week in a row, Mac Wilson has played mid 80% of the snaps, and he's been fairly productive. So he is someone I'd actually go out and pick up right now.
Nice. There we go. San Francisco 49ers. What's going on there?
So Javon Hargrave got put on IR and once again, this gets into defensive tackle specific leagues. Jordan Elliott, who's going to pick up some of those snaps, hurt his foot in practice, then hurt his knee during the game. Malik Collins and Kevin Givens, as a result, picked up a ton of the snaps. Givens was extremely productive, not someone that I'm relying on when you start getting to the 4th or 5th defensive tackle for the 49ers. Don't let the one weekend where he got a sack against the Patriots, who have a horrible offensive line, don't go running and spending a lot of fab dollars on Givens. In addition, on the linebacker front, what was interesting is the 49ers signed Jalen Graham off the Commanders practice squad on Tuesday. And you're like, who gives a rat's butt about Jalen Graham, Ricky? Well, here's why. Jalen Graham was a 49ers draft pick who didn't make the cut here at the end of the year. He just barely got beaten out by a couple of other linebackers. He went over to the Commanders practice squad, but Fred Warner this past week had an ankle injury. They were calling it, quote, day to day once again, but they went and signed Jalen Graham off the practice squad. Didn't hear about any other injuries to linebackers. Makes you wonder if the Warner injury is more severe or not. So if you're banking on Warner, start making contingency plans right now. And I don't know necessarily if it's Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, who I'd be picking up, who moved into Warner's spot, and Campbell stayed on the weak side during the game when Warner was out. So keep an eye on Warner and have contingency plans as the net of all that. Otherwise, I don't see why they would have gone out and gotten Jalen Graham and added him to the roster.
Gotcha. All right. Well, you have a little bit more notes here on the 49ers with Taloni Hufanga. What's going on there?
So Hufanga, had the knee injury from last year, missed first few games, came back and played, and then surprisingly was inactive again. So didn't see any notes yet. I'm waiting to find out, but I'm guessing there's probably some swelling around that knee after coming back, and maybe did he come back a little bit too soon? So Jair Brown and Malik Mustafa picked up all the snaps, 100% for both of them. So if you're counting on Hufanga, I'd be careful and all. And when people rush back from these knee injuries, they're usually, quote, not as productive anyway when they come back. But now if you got some potential complications, I'm kind of staying away from that.
Gotcha. All right, let's go down to LA and talk about the Rams safeties.
We'll just be real quick on this one. We told you John Johnson was hurt. He was playing kind of that third safety role, particularly when they brought in third safety in Quentin Lake, who hopefully you picked him up when we told you to earlier this year. Moves to that star position. So Cam Kinchin moved into that third safety role. He played about 60% of the snaps. So just a name to monitor.
Gotcha. All right, let's talk about Seattle Seahawks and that exciting Monday night game.
Yeah, I thought you were probably enjoying that game in your Lions last night, Nathan. And it's fortunate that they played the Seahawks when the Seahawks had all these injuries. Let's talk about it. Jerome Baker was out. They replaced him with a rookie. Byron Murphy, first-round defensive tackle, out. Leonard Williams, the stud they traded for from the Giants from a former first-round pick, out. Boy Mafe, key edge rusher, out. Uchenna Nwosu, who's been out since preseason, he was also out. Julian Love, the stud safety, he got injured during the game with a thigh injury. He was out. So if the Lions didn't score 42 points, I would have been very disappointed in them. The reason for mentioning all those names, as of now, they're still all uncertain for week 5. So if you have any of those players, make sure you have contingencies as we go into next week.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that was a really great game, and I enjoyed that. Jared Goff went 18 for 18 and the 2 touchdowns, almost 300 yards. I was super excited about that.
I noticed you didn't bring up that safety late in the game that almost allowed them to let Seattle get back in the game, but I noticed you mentioned that part of it.
Yeah,
Did not mention that part.
that scared me a little bit. But one thing to keep in mind, this show is sponsored by IDP Plus. You can go to idpplus.com, become a subscriber, and we have a ton of IDP tools specific to helping you win your leagues. And Ricky has to make a point of his LSU Cup. Yeah. And,
yes, I do.
Yeah, there we go. So, go to idpplus.com, use the promo code PROPS for 20% off any subscription right now. And get in and check out the different tools we got, snap counts, as well as get in our Discord and become part of our community. But with that, let's switch over to the AFC and go out east to talk about the Buffalo Bills.
Well, so Nathan, I'm going to pick up the pace here a little bit because we did run long. Let me rephrase that. I ran long on the NFC, so we'll go a little bit faster on the AFC. So let me hit all the Bills here. Balin Spector, as expected, played over 90% of the snaps at middle linebacker. Dorian Williams, 86%, which is, it continues to rise. He's been extremely productive. However, Terrell Bernard, there's a chance that he comes back this week. If that happens, Balin Spector, flush down the toilet. He has no more value. So keep an eye on if Bernard is active this week. Taron Johnson, the slot cornerback who brings great value to the cornerback position in those type of required leagues. A chance he's back from his forearm injury. Keep an eye on that because if it does, Cam Lewis, his value down the tube. Taylor Rapp ended up having a concussion. Cole Bishop, the second-round rookie, came in and did fairly well from an IDP perspective. Haven't been able to check out his grades overall. So don't count on Rapp this coming week with a concussion. And then it came out on Tuesday, Von Miller. There was some noise in the offseason about some domestic, let's just call it domestic opportunities he might have been involved with, and he was suspended for 4 games. So those that he's been productive in the limited snaps with a sack almost every week except this past week. So Von Miller, put him on the bench or even drop him potentially.
Gotcha. Let's go down to Miami with the Dolphins.
So they had a couple of key injuries during the game. Jalen Phillips, who didn't look like himself to begin with, and of course he's coming off the Achilles tear, and we said he's someone. Dynasty's one thing, redraft, I would be looking to get rid of him, trade him, etc. Well, he was having trouble, and his right knee gave out on him, for lack of a better term. So he ended up getting ruled out during the game fairly quickly once he got injured and he saw he couldn't go anymore. He's already been ruled out for this coming week. So get him out of your lineups. Jordan Poyer, from a safety perspective, he left the game with a shin issue as well. No updates yet. He hasn't been that productive, though, so someone I'm not looking to get in my lineups.
Gotcha. All right, let's move up north to the New York Jets And what's going on with their defensive ends?
So Will McDonald had multiple sacks, and you thought, wow, breakout, breakout. This is fantastic. And he had played 75% of the snaps. Then we come in against the Broncos in that lousy, boring game, and he only played about 54% of the snaps in week 4. So one of the things we talked about earlier in the year about him is another one that's, quote, lighter in the britches. So he did bulk up some in the off season going into year 2, but still not as strong as he probably needs to be, similar to like a Bryce Huff here in Philadelphia. And as a result, for whatever reason, that 75% playing time looked like an outlier. Those 3 sacks look like an outlier at this point. Someone that don't rely on that 1 week outlier. Look at those other 3 weeks and say, if I'm desperate, I'll throw him in there. Or if I'm in a big play lead and I think I need some sacks, that'll give me a bunch of points, put him in. But other than that, stay away from him. Also on the Jets front, C.J. Mosley was out again. Once again, another older linebacker, foot/toe issue, potentially coming back this week. Jeremy Sherwood played almost all the snaps in his place, was solid, but he's not C.J. Mosley in his prime, but he's a solid potential linebacker 3 type to put into your lineups if he plays another week and Mosley sits out another week.
Gotcha. All right, let's move from New York to Boston and talk about the New England Patriots.
Well, Kyle Duggar left the game this week after playing only about 30% of the snaps, and Jalen Hawkins, a former free agent that they picked up off the street, ended up playing almost 80% of the snaps. So Duggar at this point in time, no real word. It sounds like most likely not going to play, though. I'm not necessarily picking up Hawkins in his place, though, because they can't use Hawkins like they use Duggar. So just sit that one out. Anthony Jennings also ended up missing the game for the Patriots. He's not a heavy-duty, high, big play type of performer. He'll get you 2 or 3 tackles maybe. So Dietrich Wise, who sat in for him, actually got a sack, but neither one I'm looking to pick up.
Gotcha. All right, let's move along here in the AFC and go to the North, where we're going to talk about the Bengals. What's going on there?
Trey Hendrickson, I may have missed it, but once again, another one that I didn't see the injury news on, only played 51% of the snaps, so right away I knew something had to be wrong. Turned out he had his arm in a sling, but then it turned out it was like a neck injury, a neck stinger that they were concerned about. So I don't know if there's something else with the arm, but the neck has been what has been getting most of the noise. Joseph Osai, who is a solid kind of run stopper, not really much to him there. I'm not picking him up. Hendrickson was the pass rush for the Bengals. Hubbard is playing with an injury that he's talked about publicly, and he's going to be playing with it all year. He does not have that explosiveness and all. So staying away from all those defensive ends. Now, Miles Murphy, last year's #1 draft pick, he was on IR. They're going to designate him to return from IR. Doesn't mean he'll be active for this weekend. It could be up to 3 weeks before he gets activated. If Hendrickson is out, they might try and push it, but still Murphy's not someone based on what we saw last year that I'm picking up and playing.
Gotcha. Let's keep it with the Bengals and talk. You got Sheldon Rankins here.
Yeah, both Rankins and B.J. Hill, their starting defensive tackles, were once again out this week. So you had the likes of Zach Carter, Lawrence guy who used to play with the Patriots, and he's in his 33-ish range kind of thing. Solid veteran, experienced veteran, but maybe a little bit past his prime, for lack of a better term. But what that means is the Bengals, with all what I just described, their defense is going to struggle, which, as a side note, that could be good for their offense as well. So, if Higgins and Zach Moss and Chase Brown and Burrow, some good news there. I think they'll be involved in a lot of shootouts as a result of all this.
Gotcha. All right. Let's move on to Cleveland and the Browns, and you've got a few updates here. Let's rapid fire through those.
Okay, on all 3 levels, Myles Garrett surprisingly went back up to 75% of the snaps played despite knee, hip, feet injury, etc. And he was amazing. The dude's a monster, and he got 2 sacks. The question is, at 1-3, and if this trend continues, and they lost to the freaking Raiders, who are not very good. So if this continues, does Garrett get set out as we start getting to playoff time? Something to be really careful of, folks. In the middle, Jordan Hicks had an elbow injury. He only played 8% of the snaps. Devin Bush is the one stepped in for him, playing 86% of the snaps. JOK played almost 100% of the snaps. JOK is a linebacker to have. Devin Bush has shown us for years what he is, and he's not an IDP asset. And then finally on the back end, whereas the week before, Ronnie Hickman and Rodney McLeod split the playing time with Juan Thornhill, the safety, on IR. This week it was Hickman at 100%. McLeod happened to get the fumble recovery and the touchdown, but he played a lot less snaps. He only played in the 50% range. Don't go chasing McLeod in the fumble and the points and so forth. Hickman played more of a deep safety role. Stay away from both of them.
Gotcha. Let's talk Baltimore Ravens now.
On the Ravens, so a couple of things to talk about there. First, Trenton Simpson, last 2 weeks, his snap count, 51%, 63%. You don't want that in your lineup. They clearly don't trust him. They prefer to go with this 3-safety package with Kareem Jackson, the former Chicago Bear, who they signed during training camp. So Simpson can't play him with those kind of snap counts, folks. And he was also getting burned. So early on, he was doing good pass defense, but he was also getting burned. And another reason they're taking him off the field. Stay away from him. Odafe Owe, which is easy for you to say. Owe looks like a beast. He's only playing about 54% of the snaps, but with him and Van Noy, both of them look really good on the edges. And so Owe is someone that, particularly in a dynasty league, I'm trying to get onto my roster.
Nice. All right. Let's go to Pittsburgh with the Steelers.
Okay, let's talk about the linebacker and edges for them. So Patrick Queen once again played 100% of the snaps, and once again not that productive relative to what he was doing in Baltimore in terms of IDP stats perspective. But maybe there's a little bit of a changing of the guards. Landon Roberts played 32% of the snaps only. Peyton Wilson was up to 56%, the third-round draft pick. Landon Roberts more of a run stuffer, injury prone. Was it because of the Colts and the style that they were playing with more 3 wide, and did that cause Peyton Wilson to be on the field more? Or is this Peyton Wilson slowly working his way into the lineup? Something to keep in mind, if Peyton Wilson is someone gave up on him, particularly like in a redraft league, he is someone I'm definitely looking to put on the end of my IDP bench. Then when we go to the edges, Alex Smith hurt and was out. So Nick Herbig, who we said, okay, he is someone to target and go get. Great news, he played 73% of the snaps until he got hurt. And then when he got hurt, it looked like the Marvin Leal was someone who was a former defensive lineman who lost some weight, who played a little bit more on the edge. Not someone I'm picking up there. So anyway, Highsmith's probably going to be out again. Still waiting word for Herbig. Don't go after Leal.
Gotcha. All right, let's shift gears over here. We got 2 more divisions left, and we're going to talk AFC South. Give me the news on the Colts.
The Colts only played 71 snaps on defense this past week, and which again, in just education for our audience, usually 64, 66 snaps is roughly what a team averages on offense and our defense, and they played 80 the week before, or was it 90 the week before and 80 in a previous week. So down to 71. Their offense was on the field for 66 snaps. Now, that's because Joe Flacco took over at quarterback. So anyway, so if Richardson is back in and the way his completion percentage has been, their defense could be back on the field for a lot of snaps again. So keep that in mind when you think about Colts, part 1. Part 2 is, once again, Nick's Cross played closer to the box. Julian Blackmon had more deeper snaps. There was a little bit rotation, but much more cross closer to the box, which is more valuable for IDP. So it looks like that's what they're going to stick with because of the problems with the cornerback position. Then at defensive end, Samson Ebukam went on IR. Kwity Paye was out hurt. Tyquan Lewis hurt his elbow. I saw the snap count. I hadn't seen an injury report on him. When I saw the snap count, surely something's wrong. Sure enough, on Tuesday, Tyquan Lewis goes on IR. They're really hurting at DN. Deo Odeyingbo, who had 8 snaps last year, came through with 1.5 snaps this past week against the Steelers, which is hard to do against Justin Fields. His snap count went up into the 70s. And with Paye still a question mark with all these other injuries, I mean, they had Isaiah Land, a former undrafted free agent, getting a lot of snaps because of all these injuries. So Deo is someone, I'll go ahead and say it, Odeyingbo, one more time, someone I'm targeting to pick up actually on the Colts.
Gotcha. Let's move to Jacksonville and the Jaguars. What's up there?
The Jags, so Ryan Nielsen was pissing off all IDP owners with his rotation that he had with 4 linebackers going on and taken away from the work of Foye Oluokun and Devin Lloyd. Well, Foye Oluokun hurts his foot and goes on IR. Devin Lloyd has a knee injury and is inactive, surprisingly. He was questionable. Most people thought he was going to play. Then he goes inactive. So the other two that were rotating, Chad Muma and Ventrell Miller, got the majority of the snaps at inside linebacker. What was interesting is that Muma played more snaps, but Miller had more counting stats. So Ventrell Miller, who's more the run stuffing tackle guy, he's probably the one I'm targeting if Lloyd is also out again another week. Otherwise, I'm not targeting either of the backup linebackers. Also, I mentioned Josh Hines-Allen. He had a concussion, and it's not clear if he'll be playing this week. Probably nobody I want to pick up in his absence.
Gotcha. Let's move to Houston and talk about the Texans.
So Henry Toto shot up to 98% usage this past week as a number 2 linebacker. He hadn't been playing nearly that much, and he's been a productive tackling machine. Now, how well he's playing, that's a different discussion. But from an IDP stats perspective, particularly at 98%, someone definitely worth putting into your lineups. He's playing in place of Christian Harris, who was the number 2 linebacker, but went on IR before the season started. 4 weeks have passed. There was speculation out there that he would be activated to begin practicing and open up the 3-week window, but it came out, D'Amico Ryans, the head coach, said that they're not going to activate him this week. So the knee injury must have been more serious than expected. He is going to come back at some point this year, but not right now. So Toto is someone definitely to pick up. As a side note, Jimmy Ward missed the game. Eric Murray played 100% of the snaps in his absence. Kalen Bullock also played 100% of the snaps at that deep safety role. Murray, if you need someone desperate with bye weeks, etc., is someone you can consider putting into your lineup if Jimmy Ward is out.
Gotcha. All right, so let's wrap this division up with the Tennessee Titans.
On the Titans side of things, Jeffrey Simmons ended up sitting out, and it came out on Tuesday that he had Tommy John surgery. Now, that's something you usually hear associated with a baseball pitcher associated with his elbow, but that's the type of surgery Jeffrey Simmons had on his elbow, and that's happened during week 4. That's why he missed the game. Titans have a bye in week 5, and both Simmons and the team is saying that they expect him to play in week 6. But that'll be with some sort of heavy brace protecting that surgically repaired elbow. Lyman, we start talking about swim moves and engaging and so forth, that's going to limit him. Before word spreads, I'm looking to trade Jeffrey Simmons in a redraft league and dynasty league. I'm looking for other options as well and just putting on my bench at least for several weeks. I'm not trusting that elbow at all.
Gotcha. All right, let's move on to our final division in the AFC out west, and we're going to talk Denver Broncos.
The Broncos, linebacker. We talked about it last week when Alex Singleton surprisingly went on IR. Cody Barton did play 100% of the snaps. Justin Sternert ended up playing the second highest number of snaps at linebacker at 77%. However, remember last week we talked about they signed Quan Alexander and Zach Cunningham to the practice squad. They've now had a little bit over a week to start getting oriented. I'm not rushing out to grab Sternert. I'm still not convinced Barton is going to keep the green dot and play 100% of the snaps. I'd be watching on Saturday when practice squad call-ups occur. And if you hear one of those two names, Alexander or Cunningham, being called up, I'm avoiding Barton to be on the safe side.
Gotcha. All right, let's talk about the LA Chargers.
Okay, once again, another team with at all 3 levels, we have problems starting deep in the secondary. I shouldn't call this a problem. It was a problem for week 4, but not for week 5, as Derwin James is now off of suspension, his 1-game suspension he had for too many targeting hits. And Elijah Moden had played the majority of the snaps. So Moden will go back to the bench, Derwin James in. On linebacker side of things, Junior Colson, the rookie draft pick out of Michigan, with the ties to Harbaugh and the defensive coordinator, Mike Minter, he once again missed this past week. With that, Deion Henley went up to 95% of the snaps. Denzel Perryman was down to 69%. Perryman was at 81% the previous week, something to keep an eye on there. Henley, though, got hurt late in the game. And with that, Troy Dye came in for a few snaps and actually wore the green dot when he took Henley's place. So there could be quite the little mess right there going on. be careful with any Chargers linebackers this coming week. Finally, on the defensive line, Joey Bosa didn't go on IR, dressed in street clothes. They showed him up in the stands in one of those fancy booths watching the game. He wasn't even on the sidelines. He was sitting down there in one of the booths. Not a good sign that he will be coming back next week. So don't expect him. Tui Puloto is someone to pick up. Bud Dupree did have 2 sacks this past week, but I'd still want Tuli T over Bud Dupree. And I'm a poet, and I didn't know it until that one. Okay.
There we go. Let's talk Kansas City Chiefs. You've got some notes on their defensive backs here.
Yeah, Jalen Watson was the only defensive back to play 100% of the snaps, which was really interesting. Even Trent McDuffie only played 89% of the snaps. I didn't notice him going out of the game. He may have missed a few snaps. He got dinged up a little bit, but I didn't notice anything. Haven't seen any injury reports yet. On the safety side of things, there was a little bit more of a rotation. Shamari Connor, who a lot of people rushed to pick up last week because he had a lot of those points that came from these big plays that don't happen every week, and they were disappointed with the output this week, particularly when he only played roughly 60% of the snaps as well. So be careful about all those defensive backs. On top of that, one of the things that used to drive us crazy about Steve Spagnuolo is the percentage of time that his linebackers were playing. Now, we knew Nick Bolton was dinged up from the previous week. He only played 84% of the snaps. Drew Tranquil played only 73% of the snaps. Hard to have that productivity when you're playing, your number one linebacker is only playing 84% of the snaps. So Bolton's another one that between the injuries last year and again this year and the playing time, I'd be looking to trade him.
Gotcha. Well, you also have some notes here from the Chiefs on Michael Dana, Felix Uzma.
Yeah, easy for you to say. Felix Anuduke Uzama. He played 48% of the snaps in Michael Dana's absence, but Dana is expected to be back. Felix did have a really good pass rush and a quarterback hit that kind of splashed if you happen to be watching the game or whatever. But he's still he's the former first round pick from last year. Hasn't quite stepped up his game. Don't rush to pick him up. Don't rush to pick up any of those folks. Cam Thomas, who they traded for from the Cardinals, you think, well, if Dana's out, maybe Cam Thomas will get more playing time. He only got like 16% of the snaps and all, so not someone to chase either for deep on your bench.
Gotcha. All right, let's go to the final team here, and that's the Oakland. Or, sorry, wow, that was trying to almost said Oakland, but the Las Vegas Raiders.
The Raiders. I don't know. That was a terrible Chris Berman. I have a feeling there. But okay, so let's talk about Max Crosby first. High ankle sprain. First game he's missed in his career this past week. We talked about it a little bit earlier when we were talking about Micah Parsons as well. Once again, not playing Micah Parsons. If Crosby comes back, I do expect him to be limited. But if he's out there, unlike Parsons, who I would sit, I would probably go ahead and play Crosby. Tyree Wilson played 71% of the snaps. Top 10 pick last year, who still hasn't gotten there quite yet. Haven't given up on him yet. I'm keeping him on my dynasty benches, but redraft, he's long gone. Kayvon Chason, the LSU stud, played the most amount of snaps in terms of with some of the absences, because remember, earlier this year, and Malcolm Kuntz, I forgot his name for a second, went on IR. So Chason stepped up, and then Charles Snowden, who got a sack near the end of the game against the Browns, only played 49% of the snaps. I'm avoiding all these guys except for Max Crosby. On the linebacker side of things, Divine Diablo sat out. Luke Masterson was in his place, but it was interesting where Masterson had played about roughly 75% of the snaps the week before. He was down to 58% this past week, and Amari Burney played 20% of the snaps, which I haven't been able to go and watch all 22 tape on this one yet. But what that tells me is that Masterson probably went out on passing downs and Burney came in on passing downs, which is part of the reason Masterson is a number 3 linebacker. Diablo may be back this coming week, something to watch. But if he's not, I'm not playing Masterson at 58% of the snaps, particularly with, I'd be willing to bet I'm right on the Burney situation. And lastly on the Raiders, Nate Hobbs, who had a significant decrease the week before in his snap count, and like, what the heck? All of a sudden, they bounced him back up to 98%. And Jack Jones, who's been a productive cornerback, was down to 66%. Well, that tells me stay away from those Raiders cornerbacks as a result for cornerback required leagues.
Gotcha. All right, with that, that wraps up our division by division run through on the news and injuries. Again, make sure that you are checking up with us each week. The show IDP Advice. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Nate Cheat, at RickyRod66, as well as our main channel at IDP_plus. With that, just thank you again for being with us for another week, and good luck in the coming fantasy matchups.